Obamacare. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Stupid people are ruining America.
The president just wants to take care of you. He just doesn't think you're able to do it for yourself.
There's a very thin line between communism, progressivism, Marxism, socialism.
The empire will strike back.
You still don't know that this was political.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of America Our Way on Vigilant Liberty Radio. I am your host, Dustin Hoyt. Here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, I do things a little bit differently on America Our Way. I tend to be more libertarian than the bunch, and I appreciate you folks who take time to listen to my show every week, who like my page and engage on my page. I appreciate all of that. Been getting a lot more traffic over there recently, and I really appreciate it. I want to start today off talking about what's making headlines, which I'm sure all of you have heard, the VA scandal. Now, the VA scandal is interesting because it's something that the media is starting to call Obama out on. And for many of you who don't know this, first-time listeners, whatnot, I work in the media. I am behind the scenes for a TV station. I don't get into it too much in terms of the day-to-day, but a lot of it involves going through stories and seeing, what's going on in the country and in my area, all that kind of stuff. And the VA scandal is particularly interesting for me because I work literally on the same block as a VA hospital, and I get a lot of veterans that call in, and this story has brought in a lot more calls, and it's something that I'm grateful I get to carry over here onto my program, because it's something very distressing for our nation's veterans. I mean, regardless of how you feel about the wars, you can't help but admire veterans for signing up to sacrifice their life for freedom. Now, whether or not you think they're fighting for freedom, it doesn't matter. Because when these guys sign on the dotted line for whatever reason, they sign over their life to Uncle Sam. And a lot of you guys are libertarians. A lot of you folks are small government folks, and you don't approve or appreciate some of the wars that we're going through, a lot of the interventionist policies that our country has and whatnot, but you can't help but respect the veterans, and they deserve that respect. You can't deny it. I mean, it's a shame the way our country is treating our veterans. I mean, the idea that a veteran could have a serious illness and has to wait weeks just to see a doctor, to refer them to another doctor in a few weeks, to refer them to a surgery in weeks after that, and it's resulting in deaths and sometimes months, 9-month-long waiting lists and whatnot. It's unconscionable. And what makes this scandal even worse is that it's not new, and a lot of people are not bothering to take into account the true scope of this scandal. It's not just that veterans' lives are being put at risk because they can't get the health care they need. It's that this problem has been around for the entirety of Obama's administration. He was talking about it as early as August of 2007, and in all likelihood, the VA backlog, which is what causes these massive delays for people trying to get in to see doctors, for veterans trying to see doctors and their families. You cannot help but take a look at what Obama has said and done with the VA backlog. One of his quote-unquote claims to fame, one of the things he was taking credit for, was reducing and trying to eliminate the VA backlog. Now, that backlog, the movement, so to speak, in the government to reduce the backlog, to digitize veterans' records and requests and things like that, could arguably be what caused this scandal. Now, I realize that this is just speculation on my part, but you cannot help but draw this conclusion. When the President of the United States makes it a priority to deal with the backlog, and there are no reasonable changes to the bureaucracy itself, there was no mass adding of doctors, there was no mass overtime to try and get these guys in to see their doctors, you can't help but look at his claims of reducing the backlog and think, well, if your boss is the President of the United States and he says, we're going to reduce this backlog, we're going to tackle this, and you have to show results, you're being pressured by your bosses from all angles, it's no wonder that you've got people that are making secret waiting lists to try and appear to be reducing this backlog. I hypothesize, I believe that the reason these secret waiting lists appeared is because people were being pressured to do something about the backlog with no real solutions except for reducing the number of people in line to get health care. Now, at least with the physical backlog, there was a line. But now, with these secret waiting lists, you've got the illusion of something being done with no practical, actual answers. I mean, think about that for a second. Imagine if you go to work and you're way behind and you need help, and your boss, rather than getting you the means to improve your performance, hiring someone else to help you with it, giving you staff to deal with it, your boss simply demands that you double your output, period. I mean, if you're in that stressful situation and you work for an organization where it's almost impossible to get fired, the government, your solution may not be a solution. You may start doing things under the table simply to show results without actually giving results. Now, that's my belief in what's going on here. And as a consequence, we've got 26 VA facilities now under investigation, including at least 3 in Texas, Temple, Waco, and Austin VA hospitals. And you've got stories of veterans that, excruciating pain in their sides and they can't get into the hospital, and one veteran going in for a surgery, coming out a paraplegic and then dying days later. That story was on Hannity yesterday. And even the mainstream media is responding to the Obama administration with harsh criticism, and that's not normal. You don't see that kind of thing normally. In my opinion, all you have to do is look at what Obama said. And you can tell, because he and Jay Carney tried to claim that the administration found out about the scandal from media reports. But if you look, I mean, in 2007, he said no veteran should have to fill out a 23-page claim to get care. And then the next year, no more red tape, no more delays. And then, a year or two later, in 2012, he says no one who fights for this country should have to fight for a job or a roof over their heads or the health care they need when they come home. Obama has campaigned on this more than once, and it's still a massive issue. Now, when you look at Shinseki, the Secretary of the VA, you can't criticize the guy too harshly. I know a lot of conservatives' first thought is to look into Shinseki, and it's kind of disgusting when you look at this. This guy has been in office since 2009. He assumed office January 21st, 2009. So he's been there as long as President Obama has been there. He was appointed by Obama as soon as Obama took office. He has had this long to deal with these issues, and the issues of the secret waiting lists and stuff have arisen under his watch. When you look at it, he's taken office since before this issue became an issue, especially in the media. And you think, this one guy's got to deal with all of the people at this hospital in all of the hospitals. I mean, I kind of feel bad for the guy. I mean, he's in a terrible position, but at the same time, you cannot assume a position of responsibility and then have something like this go on under your watch and expect no repercussions. Now, you've got Obama saying he's doing a great job and he's made some progress, but arguably, the backlog reductions could have been these secret lists. It very well could have been. And not to mention, even if he did find out who was doing what, even if he did come up with names, come up with people to punish, the VA requires that you give a month's notice before a firing or a demotion, and you have a chance to appeal that. So it's like you get due process just to be fired for incompetence or something. And then, assuming it works like everything else in the government, which is not a far-fetched assumption, the bosses have to prove your incompetence, which is almost impossible to do without surveillance of your employees. The VA can't even afford to help the people that they were created to help. Not to mention the fact that the VA is basically socialism, a tiny island of socialism in the American economy. Now, I know a lot of people, kind of shy away from the word socialism, but think about this. Government-run hospitals, government-paid doctors, run by government bureaucrats to help American citizens who serve the country. You cannot be surprised that this is how government handles this institution. Look at everything that government does, all of the wasteful spending, all of the corruption and bureaucracy in government, and be surprised by the VA scandal. I mean, that's not to disparage the veterans and what they're going through, but it's one of those situations like, what did you expect? Did you expect the best healthcare in the country? Because you're not going to get that at a government hospital. Did you expect to get efficient care when you need it? Because you're not going to get that from the government. I mean, this is the same government that can't handle any situation without massive pressure from the public. And if you need proof of that, look no further than the Tea Party movement. Conservatives are being called out for not being conservatives, and it took a massive movement and the election of Tea Party Republicans just to get them to even recognize that they had an issue with not being conservative enough. And that's not to say I full-on support the Tea Party or all of their candidates or anything, but it's important to note that you've got, libertarian activists gearing up and making waves in the Republican Party, and the Tea Party making waves in the Republican Party, and this kind of fight for the soul of the party. It's proof positive that people are fed up. And you can argue that you've got the same thing on the radical socialist communist side. If you look up in Washington State, they had at least one socialist elected in that state. I believe it's city council in Seattle, and they're calling for things like wrecking. This one socialist that was elected, she was calling for the rioting and demolishing and destruction of machines at a Boeing factory, all because they weren't getting everything they wanted in a contract with the company. The union was not coming to an agreement with the company. And I mean, I'm not surprised by any of this, because I know how government works. I've seen how government functions. And as sad as the situation is, this is what happens when you place anything solely in the hands of the government. Now, I would invite all of you to call your congressmen, your senators, and urge them to vote and support Marco Rubio's bill, senator from Florida, Tea Party favorite, or former Tea Party favorite, because he's got a bill that mirrors one in the House that gives the it makes it easier for the VA to demote or fire people, as opposed to this system they've got in place now. It's just my 2 cents on the scandal. I think it's probably caused by a will from the administration to make progress without actually devoting any resources, time, or logistics into making that happen. We'll have more when we come back.
Hi, this is Alan Bordius of theirfinesthour.net. Catch me here on VLR Monday nights and also on Tuesday nights on the Roundtable of Extreme Liberty.
All right, we're back. The Senate has kind of been the sight and the focus of a lot that's going on in the country these days, and I kind of feel like it's important that we touch on one thing that happened yesterday that I feel like is not getting enough attention. Senator Rand Paul planned on filibustering the nomination of David J. Barron, who's a former Justice Department employee, is a lawyer for the DOJ, that wrote the memos justifying the use of drones against American citizens suspected of terrorism that had not been necessarily in combat. Now, this is important because, as I said earlier, the government is not efficient. The government is not very good at doing fine detail things. They're not so great when it comes to getting the little things correct because there's not much accountability there and people are able to be sloppy. And this extends into all forms of government. It's especially present in the military as well. And if the VA is not a clear enough indication, you can also look at all of the money that's wasted on materials that were sent overseas to soldiers for war that is left there. And one of the chief resources for terrorists and arms dealers and stuff like that is military gear that's left overseas by countries after war. Now, most notably, it's usually Soviet stuff, and so when the Soviet Union crumbled, it's lots of arm dealers get weapons and stuff like that from there. But the American government and military is no different. I mean, it's just, if they don't believe that if it's cheaper for them to buy new guns, they will just leave guns behind than ship them, instead of shipping them back, because it might be cheaper to buy new ones. And when you look at all of the waste in government, you can't look at that and say, gee, these are really the people I want to make decisions on who lives and who dies without due process. I mean, there is a reason Americans are supposed to get due process before any sort of execution or condemnation. And Senator Paul tried to stand on the floor today, but a procedural vote ended that rather abruptly. He only spoke for like 30 minutes. Senators voted 52 to 43 to move forward with the confirmation of David J. Barron. Now, he is being nominated to but for a judgeship on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. That is a lifetime appointment. He can never be fired or removed from that position. He can only go up or retire there. And it's nothing to shirk at, because anytime you get a judge, anytime you get someone that is more concerned with their own ideology than they are with what's right and what's correct, you open yourself up for more judges that do not uphold and defend the Constitution. Now, you could argue that as a lawyer, he knows more about the Constitution than most people, and I would say he's probably taken more classes on it, but that's not to say that those classes made any impact whatsoever. If any of you have gone to college or tried to remember what you learned in high school, then you know what I'm talking about. There's a reason we have the show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And people fail to answer fifth grade questions. People don't remember. And if the purpose of these memos, the subject, the point, are any indication of this guy's legal training, it's lacking. The idea that the U.S. government can accuse someone of terrorism and launch a drone strike at them goes against everything we believe as Americans. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, hold on, Dustin, hold on. These people are terrorists. Well, let me tell you. The people making these decisions belong to the same party as the ones who called Tea Partiers terrorists. These are the same ones who called militias domestic terrorists. These are the same ones that go to the Southern Poverty Law Center to look and see which groups are called hate groups and terror groups. Now, if you know anything about the Southern Poverty Law Center, they declare anybody that's conservative basically a hate group, especially any of the Christian groups that are against gay marriage and lobby for it. Now, you could argue that those people are not with it when it comes to civil rights and what it means in the Constitution as opposed to what it means religiously. But I think it's important to note that Senator Paul is really one of the few conservatives that is taking this drone thing seriously. What he said today, I rise today in opposition to the killing of American citizens without trials. I cannot and will not support a lifetime appointment of someone who believes it's okay to kill an American citizen not involved in combat without a trial. Now keep in mind, Senator Paul read these memos, not the redacted versions that are going to be released because of all the pressure, but he read the full memos, and he is disturbed by them. Rand Paul is a Republican. He is more conservative than his libertarian father. If it bothers him, you can bet that if you are a constitutionalist, if you believe in freedom, they were really going to bother you. And more importantly, the president having unilateral power to declare death and execution like he's the Queen of Hearts should terrify you, especially when it involves people who are not confirmed to be in a terrorist role, not confirmed to be in combat with Americans. And this is exemplified best when you look at the fact that this all came here. This all came into play. This became spotlighted whenever the memo was used to authorize the killing of radical Muslim cleric Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen in 2011. Now, al-Awlaki arguably was a terrorist who was trying to radicalize people, who was trying to commit acts of terror or organize acts of terror or bring people to terrorism. That being said, he's still an American citizen. And I have yet to see any proof that he actually launched attacks on Americans. If he did, then it should be easy to prove, release that information, and put this to bed. What will be harder to prove is the killing of his 16-year-old son as justified. Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, an American citizen, was killed in a drone strike days after his father while he was in Yemen. Now, as a 16-year-old in Yemen, he may have been involved in terrorist activities. But Senator Paul read these memos and he's disturbed by it. So I am of an opinion that we need to see these facts. We need to see that this guy was engaged in terrorist activities, whether that be a Al-Qaeda terrorist training camp or something. But even so, if he never actually engaged in combat with Americans, what is he guilty of? What is he guilty of if all he did was listen to his crazy father? Imagine your parents are crazy, and you are judged based on the comments that they have made, or the actions that they have taken. We are supposed to live in a country where you cannot be judged by the actions of your parents. If your father is a serial killer, we don't judge you to be a serial killer. If you are a rape baby, we do not automatically judge you to be a rapist. So it is incredibly important that we not rush to judge the 16-year-old boy that was killed in a drone strike by our president. Now, unfortunately, Obama's drone strikes are mostly covered by groups like Code Pink. And conservatives have kind of been slow to catch on with the whole drone thing. But Obama has used drones many times over, more than President Bush did, and is responsible for killing many civilians. I mean, he droned a wedding party because a suspected terrorist might have been there. Imagine going to your daughter's wedding. You're happy and excited to see her, dressed in her white dress, excited to share her life with her new husband. You're going to walk her down the aisle and give her away. And her husband-to-be has this one really creepy friend that seems kind of radical, might have some fanatical beliefs. And then halfway through the ceremony, a bomb is dropped. Never mind that most of the people there are innocent. There's children, flower bearers, ring bearer. Never mind the children, the mothers, the grandmothers. Never mind all of them. Our president is okay with launching a drone strike to kill one person. Dropping a bomb on that wedding to kill that one person. Now here in America, we don't do that. Here in America, we don't go and kill a bunch of innocent people to get one bad guy. Cops don't kill hostages so they can get the bad guy. Soldiers do not throw a grenade into a room full of women and children because one terrorist might be in there. That's not what our guys do. That's not what America's about. And yet, when it comes to drone strikes, that's the reality. They are used far too often, with far too little clarity, far too little degree of accuracy, and no one seems to bat an eye because somebody with a joystick did it from thousands of miles away. Now, for me, I think, and I was raised to believe that life is sacred. And as conservatives and libertarians, I know most of you, if not all of you, believe that too. And I know you also believe in the rule of law, in your rights, in your constitutional rights. So why then are we not hearing more outrage about the president unilaterally killing an American citizen without a trial? What would happen if it was an American in America? What would happen if it's found out that the 16-year-old was completely innocent? He just had a crazy father. And that's a very real possibility. We know that many innocent children are killed because of drone strikes. They are killed by drones because a terrorist might be in the area. And we've heard the left spout off that drone strikes cause more terrorists and stuff like that. When you look at who they're killing, it's not that hard of an idea to get behind. It's not that hard. It's not that difficult. You don't have to do mental gymnastics to think, hey, maybe this program ain't that good. Maybe this program is not what we as Americans want to stand by. Maybe we as Americans expect there to be a higher degree of accuracy if we're going to launch a bomb at another country. Now that's just my opinion. I think that the president should be held accountable for these things. I believe that you lose all moral standing if you're okay with bombing children to get one terrorist. Now, I know a lot of the vets and a lot of the people that are familiar with the situation will say, you know, terrorists will just hide behind kids and women to prevent being attacked, and we can't allow that to stop us from taking out terrorists and things like that. But you have to understand, we need to draw the line. We need to draw the line at where America is willing to go and what we're willing to do when it comes to attacking potential terrorists. And I vote killing 16-year-olds who are American citizens born and raised in America, no matter who their parents are, at least deserve a trial. They at least deserve their day in court before the president drops a bomb on them. Now, if he's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then I will retract all of my opposition to that drone strike. But until then, I think that there needs to be accountability. We'll be back in a minute.
This is Liz Harrison. And you know, I have no idea how many times people have told me conservative women can't be sexy. Well, we can prove them wrong. Listen here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, Friday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern, the Conservative Feminist Show, where the ladies are kinkservative.
All right, we're back. Now, as the midterms get closer, we are seeing more and more primaries get underway here in the election, and Tuesday was primary day in many parts of the country, and we're seeing a lot of speculation and conclusions being drawn not necessarily with substance to back them up, and I think it's important that we touch on that. Namely, Mitch McConnell's victory in Kentucky. Many people are saying the Tea Party has lost. The Tea Party is losing its chokehold. All because Mitch McConnell won his primary. And there was a few other establishment Republicans that beat out their Tea Party challengers in the primary. Now, it's important to note something that every basic poli-sci student knows. It is practically impossible to unseat an incumbent. It is an act of God to beat a sitting congressman in a primary or an election for their seat. You have to have the best campaign, the best grassroots, and almost all the time the most funding. Now, it seems to me that people are forgetting or discounting the success of candidates like Ted Cruz, who beat out a very well-known establishment Republican, Dewhurst, for his Senate run. And people are forgetting about that and saying, oh, but you've got McConnell who just won, and that means that you've got, you know, the establishment coming back into power and stuff like that, and you've also got establishment people being beaten in Philadelphia suburbs, but that, you know, Democrat race. And then you've got Dr. Monica Welby, who won the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate seat. And arguably, she's going to lose the main election against the Democrat because some information has arisen about her stalking a boyfriend and having some crazy drama in her past, etc. But it's important to note that the establishment is strong, very strong. The GOP is not something easily trifled with, and they didn't underestimate the Tea Party like they did last time. They underestimated them, and they swept many of their elections because of that. Well, the GOP didn't underestimate them this time, and they ran hard elections. They ran good campaigns, and they won. And you also have to keep in mind that a lot of these districts that are held by the establishment Republicans, such as John Boehner in his district, a lot of people in those districts love them. And I know a lot of you folks listening are saying, that's crazy, who loves Mitch McConnell or who loves John Boehner? And the answer is the people in their district who benefit from the earmarks, who benefit from having the Senate leader for the GOP being from their district, or the Speaker of the House being from their district. And it's the same thing goes when you look at people like Sheila Jackson Lee. Somebody sends a letter to their congressman saying they want their son to come home from Afghanistan for Christmas, and she makes a phone call to get that to happen. Beating someone who has used government power to entrench themselves at home is almost impossible. You have to understand that. Understanding that it is an extreme feat to unseat someone who's been in office, and understanding that the Republican structure, the Republican establishment, is a very powerful foe, and then you start to get an idea of what actually happened in these elections. The Tea Party, generally speaking, doesn't have a whole lot of financial backing. It's, average American Joes donating $5 to $20 to try and get their candidate to win. It's these big donors, they like the establishment people because there is a theory that the more moderate a person is, the more likely they are to be electable. And a lot of donors are scared of new people coming into the scene as well, because new people are untested, and a lot of times they have skeletons in the closet. They could be unstable. They could be full of crap. And if you need proof of that, just look at Radel. I mean, the guy from New York and the guy from Florida. You had one Tea Party favorite from New York threaten to throw a reporter over the balcony, and now he's in trouble for funding scandals, election campaign finances. And you got the guy from Florida, the Tea Party favorite, who was doing cocaine. Then you got the one in Louisiana who was making out with his married staffer in his office. And you start to kind of see why donors are hesitant to spend big money on these candidates, despite, where their positions differ from the establishment. And so you could have a really strong, wealthy, libertarian, conservative, whatever, who's not willing to donate big dollars to a lot of these candidates because they don't know them. And how many people do you know will invest money in something that's not a sure thing? Not many. And running an effective campaign is not something that anybody can do. Anybody can help, but it's not something anybody can do. And a lot of the people that are professionals are not going to bet on a losing horse. They don't like the underdog. That being said, you do get elections like Ted Cruz where they're outspent and are still able to come away with a big victory. But it's few and far between. And so when people are looking at this saying, the establishment is getting its house in order and they're starting to kind of take back some traction and all that, they're missing the big picture. All of these establishment Republicans that had to fight against the Tea Party, they ran races that were much further to the right than they ever have before. They ran as stronger conservatives because the Tea Party had them against the ropes. And rightfully so. Because they need to be held accountable by the voters in their district, just like anybody else. Now, don't be discouraged. Don't let it get to you that these establishment people are winning their races, because, quite frankly, unless you've got a whole bunch of staunch libertarians or conservatives in a district, you're not going to see victories for the staunch conservatives or libertarian candidates. Now, you do get lucky sometimes to be represented by like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz in my case, but we've also got Cornyn. And there was nobody viable running against him, and he's not a horrible candidate. And as bad as Mitch McConnell may be, at least he's not Harry Reid. And I know a lot of libertarians have taken shots at Rand Paul for saying, he congratulated McConnell and even threw support behind him. And they're calling, wow, disappointed, and I won't vote for you in a presidential election and stuff like that. Look, the bottom line with this is that Rand Paul has a big benefit that comes from the Senate minority leader, the GOP leader, being from Kentucky. He gets a lot of political sway because of that. And Ted Cruz, as conservative as he is and as reluctant as he was to endorse John Cornyn, he still gets a lot of extra power having somebody in the leadership from his state. So politically speaking, is it sensible to lose someone in leadership from your state simply because you don't want that person's idea, because that person's ideology might be a bit more moderate than you like? And so this is the whole practical politics coming into play. People are not willing to give up that power that comes with having someone in the leadership represent them to replace with a rookie, to replace with a freshman congressman. Now, I'm one of those people that believes we should vote the bums out, but I'm also highly politically active, and most Americans, it's hard to even have a conversation about politics that goes anywhere, because most people believe that economics and social issues are matters of opinion and not matters of rights and facts. So you have to keep all of this in mind when you're looking at what happens in these elections to try and draw conclusions. It is not as cut and dry as people are trying to make it out to be on one side or the other. On people saying the Tea Party is suffering losses, or as people trying to say this is a sign that the Republicans are going to come together for elections. That's really not the way it works. The only thing that we can hope for, the only thing that we can really cross our fingers about, is Republicans winning the general elections coming up in November. If you really, really want to make a difference in the country, if you strongly believe that the world will be better if Republicans take the Senate, then 2014 is where your hopes need to lie. Now, if you're a cynic like me, you look at the Bush administration and you look at all of the things that they failed to do, all of the things that they failed to pass when we had all three branches in the Republican Party. Now, I firmly blame the neocons because I don't believe that they stood for the platforms of the GOP. I don't believe that they support a free economy. I don't believe that they support a flat tax. I don't believe that they want to tackle big issues like reforming Medicaid, Medicare, or any sort of entitlement, Social Security. And they don't. People do not want to touch these issues. So if you're electing someone because you want to see changes to entitlement reform and drastic cuts to government spending, you're really not going to see it unless you can get an overwhelming wave of people that support an ideology, and we're not there yet. Conservatives and libertarians have not gotten their house together to the point to where they can make these things happen. I personally believe that if we can get a Republican president who is liberty-minded, not necessarily Reagan-esque, but liberty-minded, then we can at least hope, we can have faith that a president will come through that may be able to push the establishment in the House and Senate to tackle big issues. Ronald Reagan was famous for this because when Tip O'Neill wouldn't work with him, he appealed directly to the American people. Now, Obama has tried this with minimum wage, and as such, you've seen protests for minimum wage. You've seen pseudo-conservative candidates come out like Rick Santorum who are like, oh, I support raising the minimum wage. You even got Bill O'Reilly who's talking about, oh, you got to be for the folks. You gotta be for the folks. It's enough of this rich only party. And it just goes to show you that people will toss aside economics if they're pressured. And that's what we've seen with Republican governments in the past. They are afraid to tackle the big issues because they know that it will lose them re-election votes later, and if they screw any of it up, with Democrats throwing roadblocks everywhere they can, you're going to see problems in re-election. You're going to see problems in them trying to hold on to power. Now, I think that if you get someone like Rand Paul or Benjamin Carson into office, you might, maybe, possibly, see enough pressure to get Congress off its butt and accomplish something like a flat tax or possibly entitlement reform. I think more likely than anything, you will see entitlement reform after you've seen a second election come through. After you've seen a Republican win a second term and Republicans hold on to power. I think then you might see it. Because they know their support is waning, and if they're going to get anything done, it has to be done then. We'll have more when we come back.
Hi, this is Taylor, and while you're listening to all the other great shows here on Vigilant Liberty Radio, be sure to check out my show on Saturday nights called Saturday Night Cigar Lounge. You never know what we're going to talk about. It's always a fun time. That's Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, Saturday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
So in an interesting turn of events, the Obama administration has indicted, so to speak, several Chinese military officials for alleged hacking into American corporations and the theft of ideas, blueprints, original content, etc. from these corporations in an effort to steal and reproduce them without having the copyright licenses to do so. It's my opinion that this is possibly the most hypocritical thing the Obama administration or any administration ever has done. The Obama administration is accusing these Chinese officials of spying and hacking into American computers. The NSA spies on every American citizen every second of every day. They spy on corporations, they spy on cell phone metadata, they spy on the German Chancellor, they spy on the Pope, they spy on the Communist Committee's computers in China, and yet the Obama administration, the Justice Department, has the audacity to charge Chinese officials with a crime. Now, CNN had an interview with the Chinese ambassador to the U.S., who said as much. It's ridiculous for these charges to be leveled against the Chinese when America is doing exactly the same thing with NSA spying. America spies on more people across the world, foreign leaders, regular citizens, businesses, than any other country, any other military, any other hacking group, and arguably all of them combined. The president has killed 3,000 innocent people with drone strikes, and yet comes out against acts of terror. The president has decided to distract us by charging Chinese officials for a crime that the American government commits every second of every day. That is not to disparage spying, hacking on corporations. especially when you look at the reasons the Chinese government is doing so. But we as Americans ought to be smarter than this. We should not be fooled by the Obama administration's steps to charge these officials with anything when the NSA is doing the exact same thing to a billion people. Not hundreds of millions, there's 360 million or so people in America, but a billion people, 1 billion, almost an eighth of the population of the planet, including dignitaries from other countries. Now, I know many people try to say that our spying initiatives save lives and keep us ahead of the game when it comes to intelligence with other countries, and those points can be argued when you're talking just about officials from other countries or military apparatus. But you cannot throw out accusations or indictments to foreign officials when the NSA is doing the exact same thing. And we know it to be a fact. It's not even a question of if. We know for a fact that the American government is engaging in this activity all over the planet. All over the planet. And yet we have the audacity to call the Chinese out for it. We as Americans should be outraged at our own government's stupidity. How stupid is it to accuse someone of a crime you're guilty of? To try and hold a moral high ground when you're doing the exact same thing on a much larger scale. Judge Napolitano, if you don't know who that is, you need to look him up. He's awesome. Wrote a column for townhall.com that says as much. When you look at all of the things the government's doing, you can't take them seriously with any of their foreign policy measures. I mean, we indicted 5 low-level Chinese military officers for spying on American corporations when, in all likelihood, we probably had to hack into Chinese military computers to confirm the names of the officials in charge of that organization, in charge of that operation. I mean, the NSA spies on more than 1 billion person every minute of every hour of every day. We spy on all the people in the Bahamas as well as every person in America. And Judge Napolitano cites this number. He says, what if the data collected, if it was put into print, would fill the Library of Congress 27 times over? I mean, when you look at the sheer hypocrisy and the audacity of this administration, you cannot, absolutely cannot take it seriously. I mean, it's blatant stupidity. It is an obvious distraction. And the same thing goes when you're looking at, like, the hashtag diplomacy with the Nigerian girls. Now, I defended the administration's attempt to raise awareness about a tragedy happening, but that in no way diminishes the fact that this president has killed thousands of innocent people with drone strikes that were inaccurate, chalking them up to collateral damage. And it doesn't disparage, I mean, saying that the Chinese hacking is wrong does not disparage the NSA hacking as justified or something. When you look at this, you have to look at it and see the Obama administration is trying to say that it's okay for them to spy on the entire planet, but it's not okay for the Chinese to hack into a couple of organizations in order to avoid millions of dollars and thousands of hours of research to become a developed nation. Now, I am of the mind that they should be able to buy these ideas from American companies or outsource the data. And there is even arguments to be made that we should help the Chinese out because the more advanced they become, the more goods and services become available for cheap prices on the market. There are arguments here that can be made. But the chief argument that disturbs me most is that we now have a president that can get away with bloody murder including being a massive hypocrite, and not be called out for it? How is it that we have ended up in a country, a free country, with a government that is able to pull something like this off with no consequences? How is it that we as Americans have become so complacent and so uninterested in our government that we allow massive hypocrisy to go unanswered like this? To me, on a moral level, it is disgusting. On principle, it's disturbing. I mean, there are many, many issues that the Obama administration has failed on. There are countless situations where Democrats are in the wrong. And we know this. We know it. But when you look at this, in the midst of everything that's going on, in the midst of the Snowden revelations, in the midst of WikiLeaks threatening to release a country that's being spied on by the U.S. that the Guardian did not release because they believe it's going to lead to people dying, and then look at the Obama administration indicting 5 Chinese officials, you just kind of scratch your head. How is it we are, as a society, allowing this to happen? All Nixon did was bug a Democrat office to find out what their strategy was. That's all that Nixon did. He bugged an office. Obama bugged the country. And world leaders all over the place. But the fact of the matter is, nobody cares. Very few liberty-minded people, and even fewer conservatives or Democrats, care about this at all. This is not an issue that concerns them. Most of them think, oh, well, the Chinese shouldn't spy on American businesses, and America is just doing what it can to stay safe. We've gotten to the point to where we're disinterested, or we simply just shrug it off as in, well, I figured they were spying on me anyway. The technology's been there forever. And it's just a big letdown in our country. We've gotten to the point to where officials being called out for massive hypocrisy, for blatant crimes, get away with it, stay in office, and simply declare it racist or bigoted or mean-spirited, and nothing gets done. The fact that Hillary Clinton can ever run for office again, that she can be even touted as a potential candidate, is disturbing. I mean, even if you're a Democrat, you should be disheartened and disappointed in your party simply because of Hillary Clinton's scandals in the past. White Watergate, stealing from the White House, taking money from Chinese officials. There was the issue with Stan Lee, where Stan Lee and his partner were bundling for Hillary Clinton's campaign, and you can watch a documentary on that online if you want, and she's still touted as a candidate because her moral ambiguity and her ethical failures don't count against her. Obama's failings in office have no consequences. And this is this is the society we live in. We are governed by fools because we are fools. We have children who can't behave themselves. We have an entire generation of people who are adults now going into the workforce who have chosen all of the opinions and entertainment and ideas that they encounter their entire lives, thanks to the hundreds of channels and the internet, so that they don't ever have to hear an opposing point of view. And being presented with it or subjected to it has become abhorrent to them. Their fragile little minds and their fragile little world can't handle an opposing viewpoint. And all of this compounds the fact that our disinterested society that chooses not to watch the news, that chooses not to see what's going on in the country, doesn't care when a president accuses another country of a crime that we commit 10 times over, 100 times over even. We are a nation of hypocrites. And I hope that I can count on all of you to fight that in your everyday lives. If you have kids, I hope you take the time to talk about politics with them. If you have friends, I hope you take the time to discuss politics with them. It's high time that we, as the listening few, as the educated minority, take the time to push back on this issue, to hold our ground and to say no. We should have these conversations. You should care about your government. It should bother you that you're represented by massive hypocrites who can't even be bothered to do the most basic things like not break the law, not stand by their oath to uphold the Constitution, or even hold positions that are pro-liberty. And that's where we'll end it tonight. I appreciate you folks listening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. This is America Our Way. I am Dustin Hoyt. You're listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio, and I will see you next time.